All it takes is one sound. I've been revisiting games from my childhood, and I realised how many of them have been forgotten, even by the people who played them. Everyone remembers GoldenEye, but GoldenEye is the exception. When you look past the handful of classics, most of the games that people my age grew up with are already fading away. And now I keep thinking to myself, will every game that we love eventually be forgotten? Because it's only after having lived through multiple gaming generations and making videos on old games that I've realised you never notice when something stops mattering to everyone else, because it never stopped mattering to you. This cycle of games being popular and slowly being forgotten has already played out once before during my lifetime. All I have to do is mention the ZX Spectrum to my dad, and he will start listing off games like Marsport, Tiananog, Horace Goes Skiing. All these games that immediately bring back nostalgia for him, and many people today would have never heard of. But to my dad, these are the classics. You don't realise you've become the same way until you catch yourself doing the exact same thing. I did play some of these games as a kid because we still had the ZX Spectrum lying around, but many people my age have probably never heard of these games. And even those people who did play them, they're not actively thinking about these games anymore. They've just been quietly forgotten about. These games didn't disappear. What really happened is they stopped being part of popular culture. And what shocked me more than anything is that many games from my own childhood have already entered this forgotten phase. At my job, I work with young adults, and the games that I played as a kid are no longer relevant. When I ask what kind of games they've been playing, it's usually the same answers. Games like Roblox or Fortnite. If I mention I've been playing World of Warcraft, I'll just get a blank look. Some of them have never even heard of it. I'll say it like it's my guilty admission that I've spent a lot of time in World of Warcraft, until they just bring up a different game instead. World of Warcraft is becoming my ZX Spectrum. It feels like every game comes with a hidden best before date in popular culture, even if in your head it lasts forever. I was talking with a student the other day, and he said something that caught my attention. He was talking about an old Roblox update and how he played it with his friends like it was the good old days. And after that, he went on to talk about a season of Fortnite, and he made it sound like an era of his life. This stood out to me because he's already nostalgic, and he's still a teenager. But for him, these really were the good old days. It's not that my old games mattered more than his. It's about the time in our lives when we played them. It made me realise that many of the games that I played as a kid have been completely forgotten about. So I decided to sit down and make a list of as many games as possible that I remember playing. And what I started to think about wasn't that these games are largely forgotten about. It was the amount of games that I played. And if I was to sit down and keep listing, I could probably name more and more. Many games that I hadn't thought about in years. And of course, when I played these games, they were current and they were part of my everyday life. Over time, I didn't notice them stop being relevant. I just moved on to the newest thing. Games like GoldenEye have survived in memory because they've become a symbol for that time. If someone even mentions the Nintendo 64, the next thing they say will probably be GoldenEye. But the truth is, most games aren't remembered this way. Most games people my age grew up with are already being forgotten about. Nothing made this more clear to me than when I made a video on Nanosaur. I put it out as a reel on Instagram, and the amount of people that commented saying that they remember playing this game but had no idea what it was called shocked me. All of these people didn't even realise they wanted to remember it until it was shown to them by an algorithm. They didn't forget because it meant nothing. The comments showed the game actually meant quite a lot. They forgot because no one said the name out loud for over 20 years. And the second they saw it, it all came back. It makes me think about the sheer volume of other games that this has happened to. Games that just quietly disappeared behind the scenes, even for the people who played these games. And as a person approaching their mid-30s, I feel like I've lived long enough to see the full life cycle of video game media. Those games that I cared about have just become history, small building blocks that iterated upon each other until we reached to where we are today. But then some games are rebooted instead of remembered. When I saw that the game Marathon was being rebooted, I didn't feel hyped. If anything, it just made me feel old. The new game looks nothing like the game that I played 30 years ago, because I expected another single player shooter with a story, and instead it was an extraction shooter. Marathon is a game I've tried to talk about for years years on YouTube, it's never stopped being relevant to me. But to most people, marathons stopped being relevant years ago. Recently, I tried to buy a CRT TV for a future video I have plans for. I thought that finding one of these TVs would be easy, until I started asking around when most people said, "What the hell is a CRT TV?" Then I met someone who told me that they bought this television in 1992. That means it's the same age as me. Looking back at old hardware makes you realise just how fast technology has changed over the years. I recently made a video highlighting this old Mac, and it made it abundantly obvious to me. Once I turned the computer on, without the internet, I had no idea what to do with it. But back in 1996, when this computer was brand new, it felt so cool to be able to play video games on it. We don't notice these things becoming obsolete, because eventually we just stop using it and forget about it. Gaming has completely changed over my lifetime. There used to be a lot more friction when you wanted to play a game. Nintendo cartridges may have failed to be read. You give it a trusty blow, reseat it in the Nintendo, and hope that this time it would work. Discs may have got too dusty or covered in fingerprints, or maybe you've just scratched it too many times. Plugging in the consoles and finding the right channel. It always makes me laugh when I see my nephew be perplexed when my Xbox controller is not synced up to the console. And when there's any problems with the HDMI cable, no matter how many times I've explained what that cable is, he just has no idea. But those moments make that old hardware feel meaningful. Having these old discs to look at brings back many memories. Something just feels right about blowing into a Nintendo cartridge, even if it is debatable that it did anything at all. In the years to come, my nephew may look back at the times when we had to sync the Xbox controller. The modern gaming experience is completely different. Putting those discs and cartridges aside, I'm now left with a huge Steam library. I can instantly download any game that I purchase. When you have instant access to decades of gaming history, it becomes easy to treat them as throwaway experiences. There's not much to remember that game by physically. That different feeling creates different memories. Whereas I can look at those discs and remember those games even just from the graphics on the disc. I rely more on those sensory memories on how I felt when I played these games on Steam. When I eat a certain food, I may remember one game that I played at a certain time in my life. For instance, one that comes immediately to mind is just before I went to hospital, I played V Rising. So when I think about being in poor health, I think about that game. So you can think about these games as time capsules. And in a way, it's like visiting a museum of your own life. For me, it's moments like when I went to the Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 midnight release, expecting it to be busy, and the shop was totally deserted. The first time I played Halo split screen at my friend's house after college. A World at War lobby where someone used a J tag and suddenly I was max prestige. All those shareware discs that I played growing up, that I still have lying around to this day. And there's things that I had completely forgotten too. When I watched an old video of mine, I noticed that I had this giant CD rack next to my computer, and only by seeing this image did it jog my memory and make me realise just how many CDs that I used to have. Thinking about certain games may remind you of hard times that they helped you through. When I think back to Dynasty Warriors 4, I don't just think about how much I enjoyed that game. I think about how it kept me company at a time when I was quite lonely, or how this old obscure game Project Eden was one of the few games that I played with my mum on the PlayStation 2. And with these games, while we're not necessarily still playing them, we are still remembering them. While it's nice to load up these old games every now and then and remember what it used to be like, I never end up playing these games for very long. I don't sit there and grind at GoldenEye, although if you're in the speedrunning community, this may actually be what you do. But for the majority of these old games, I'm happy to play them for 10 minutes and put them down again. What I really want to do with this and my other videos is highlight those games for people who had forgotten about them or may have never played them. Every single one of these old games has paved the way for the games that we have today. And when I think about that cycle of relevancy, a game being made, becoming popular, then slowly being forgotten about, it's really just about getting older. Looking at old physical media makes you realise how much time has actually passed, and accepting that the things that you used to love have become part of history. So will every game that we love eventually be forgotten? Probably. And it's not because the games weren't good enough, it's because our popular culture has a best before date for everything. When we find ourselves missing an old game, we're actually missing the life that we had at that time, whether that was the friends that you played with or the game keeping you company during a tough time. While you might have played them alone, you remember them together. Sometimes all it takes is one sound or a screenshot or a name that hasn't been said for years, and suddenly you're right back there when you first played it. So if you want to join me in remembering some of those games, then click this video right here. Thank you so much to the Patreon and YouTube channel members, and thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next video.